Fog number 47 is Gary Belcher. Born in Brisbane, Gary grew up in Acacia Ridge and played his junior football with Southern Suburbs before going on to be a member of the South's premiership-winning side of 1985. As well as being a premiership winner in Brisbane, Gary Belcher won 2 grand finals with the Canberra Raiders, the club he joined in 1986, the year he made his State of Origin debut. Gary was twice named the Canberra Raiders Player of the Year and in 2008 was named Fullback in the South's Brisbane Team of the Century. In all, Gary played 16 Origin games for Queensland and 15 Test matches for Australia. Well, Gary Belcher, thanks very much for your time. What does it mean to you to be a Fog?
I'm very proud that I got to play for Queensland, Mark. I watched the early days of interstate footy from as a young bloke growing up playing footy in Brisbane, and the change that came about in the way Queenslanders felt about themselves from that first game in 1980 was just incredible. How we were finally, put our mark on rugby league in the Australian scene and then kept winning and kept with Wally and Mal and Gene and these blokes. They kept winning. So I was on the fringe of that. I was 18 in 1980. So to finally make it into the team a few years later, and I knew I wasn't ready when I was 19 or 20 or 21. I just wasn't kind of up to that level, or maybe mentally wasn't quite ready for that stage. So to make it and to become a State of Origin player was it blew me away. It didn't happen until I went to Canberra, my first season down there, and I think that's when I kind of realised that I was up to it, that I could handle it, that I was good enough. And I played a lot of footy, but next to Mal in particular at South in Brisbane and Peter Jackson and the likes. So to know that I could compete and to now know that I did, and I'm a State of Origin player, an old one, a very old one. It fills me with great pride, mate. Yeah.
Take us back to the early days, growing up in Brisbane, I suppose in Brisbane, really, and at West End. What was life like for Gary Belcher growing up in the city of Brisbane?
Well, yeah, I was on the outskirts, actually. I was out at Acacia Ridge. The South was at West End. I spent a bit of time in there, but I was way out wide. But yeah, it was all about footy. We were, there weren't a lot of other sports being played. Well, there were, but not by me and my mates, and not at our school and in my social circles. We were just playing footy and playing cricket in summer, and I think a lot of players, a lot of mates of mine, still really good mates of mine, went through the grades at South and into the top grades and had a crack, and a lot of them made it as well. But it was it was kind of free and easy back in the day, back in growing up in Acacia Ridge and making our way up to South Juniors, not far away, in the same suburb, only a K or two away. And we had great people around us. I think that's the thing that really I reflect on a lot, is the great people that ran our footy club. And it happened all over Brisbane, happened all over Australia. In any sports organisation, there's people that are volunteers that just make it happen for you. And you just turn up as a kid and you play. You don't realise how much goes behind the scenes. But over the years, I've become really appreciative of the likes of Jack Astle in particular, who ran South Juniors, and all of the great people that he had around him. And he just allowed us to, or they all just allowed us all to do our thing, turn up, play footy. Dads and were the coaches, and the mums were maybe managers or working the canteen and cutting up the oranges. And we just, we wreaked havoc in that suburb, and we had a great time playing footy.
A lot of the Fogs come from regional areas, and speaking to them, it's a big move for them to come, say, from Scotty Prince at Mount Isa to the Big Smoke, and Nate Miles from Gordon Vale in North Queensland to go to the Bulldogs, etc. Yeah. You were able to stay at the one club all the way through until you went to the Canberra Raiders. So I would imagine there was never really much of a thought process of where you were going to try and develop your career, because you always stayed there at Souths.
Yeah, I did, and my career, all my juniors And then into grade, it was all about trying to become a South player. I wanted to play in grade. I wanted to play in the grades. And after I'd been there, my first year, I realised I wanted to play first grade. But it was never hard. It was never a lot of travel. It was never a big upheaval. I didn't have to go far, and my mates I grew up with were the same. So, but then when I finally had to go to Canberra, I realised and that club was and probably still is mostly full of people from outside down in Canberra, people that have come from the bush or come from Queensland or Brisbane or even from Sydney. So everyone had travelled, and nearly everyone had to come from outside, and you realise then, I realised then just how much effort and, those players had gone to that come from the bush to South. Brad Tessman and a bunch of guys that came down from Kangaroo, Laurie Clark and those sort of guys. That area was really strong at South, and we had players that had come from North Queensland. And you do realise, I realised how lucky I was that I could stay at home, develop as a footballer. It was all pretty cruisy, and I was 23, going on 24 when I finally had to, pack up and head down south. But I was I was an 18-year-old wet behind the ears kid that was going to have to, make huge sacrifices. I just got married actually, and I was 23 and a half, and it made it a lot easier to head south.
And you were playing in a competition which was as strong as anywhere in the world, really, with players, international players, left, right and centre, massive crowds. What was the catalyst then to leave that competition? And so many South players ended up playing at Canberra as well. Tell us about the move and how it came about.
Well, the comp was really strong, but in a lot of ways it was sort of fading as far as you could tell the crowds were dropping off a bit. The money just wasn't there. So that was one of the catalysts. The money wasn't there. I always wanted to stay at South. I had a pretty good job in Brizzy. They were paying me a bit of money, but not a lot, and things were good. But I had this burning desire to play State of Origin. I couldn't get a look in. Colin Scott was playing great. I played one game in 1984 for Brisbane, combined Brisbane, a Panasonic Cup game. They ended up going on and winning the comp that year, the Panasonic, the pre-season comp or the midweek comp. But I couldn't break into State of Origin, and that was definitely for me the catalyst. Look, Brisbane, I've always said to people, the worst thing that happened to us was Joe Bialke-Peterson, because he wouldn't allow pokies in Queensland. But over the border and in Sydney, they had pokies. They had lots of money. That's the only difference between those comps. So for years, the best players had headed looking for the money to make a better living for themselves, whereas you couldn't really get it in Brizzy. So that's what held so many of those clubs back. And there was a lot of players in the same position as me. I think over a couple of seasons, 86, 87, someone said, had a look at all the players that went down from every club, and there's about 50 players from Queensland that went to Sydney clubs, heaps of guys to East, Trevor Patterson and Cavill Hugh, and Big Gavin Jones went from East. He went to North in Sydney. Gary Corn and Steve Walters came down with us. There was just so many players. A bunch of guys from Brothers went down as well, and nearly every club, the best players were heading south, because we're all just looking for make a little bit more money or get that exposure to play State of Origin. So when I was actually asked by the Raiders in the end of '84 if I wanted to go. I wasn't that keen. We still had things to do at South. We just got smashed in the grand final. We felt, certainly under Wayne Bennett, that better things were on the horizon. They did. We ended up winning the comp in '85. So I hung around a bit longer. Mal signed with the Raiders sort of towards the end of the year, and then he helped convince me to go down there as well. I had a few different clubs I was talking to, but I'm so glad I went to Canberra. I'm so glad I kept that relationship, that combination up with Mal. And then the same year, Stevie Walters and Gary Corn came. The next year, great mate Peter Jackson, Kevy Walters made their way to the Raiders, and things worked out pretty well for us.
before you got there, was that 1985 grand final that you alluded to there, beating Wynnum at Lang Park. What are your memories of one of the great grand finals?
Well, it was when I look back and I've seen it played a fair few times. It was just a dust bowl by the end of the year. So the grounds they didn't know how to look after the grounds back then, and they wouldn't run out today if they turned at some of the grounds that we played on in the mud and the dust and the. But it was a great crowd. It was they were massive favourites. They deserved to be as well. Hell of a team that Wynnum team with Wally Lewis, Gene Miles, Greg Dowling, Colin Scott, Gary Coyne, Terry Butler. Absolutely outstanding team that could have beaten almost every side in the Sydney Comp, I reckon. So we had to be at our very best, and Wayne had us primed, and he has made clear on a lot of occasions since that we'd probably only get one crack at beating that great Wynnum side, and hoping that we didn't beat them early in the finals and have to play them again in the grand final. And as it all worked out, we did. We only met them in the grand final, and it was a 10-8 scoreline. Normie Carr scored our only try. Wynnum didn't score till late. Our blokes defended their hearts out. We had Chrissy Phelan up front on one knee, and Eddie Muller was outstanding. And these gritty halves, Wayne Cullen and Gary Frenchie went on. They both went. Wayne Cullen went and played at Wests in Sydney, and Frenchie was one of the early Broncos. They just tackled their hearts out, and we squeezed out a win. I've got wonderful memories of that game. It's one of my favourite games ever. It made it kind of easy to leave. I never wanted to leave Brizzy. I never wanted to leave my mates. I never wanted to leave South, but I'd already signed with Canberra. But it did make it easy after that, knowing that assignment was over and could move on to other things.
Well, you joined Canberra at a time when they were on the rise as well. A grand final wasn't too far away, and then first premierships with them as well. What was it about that environment there when you joined, the arrival of Mal, yourself and other players that you'd mentioned, and Steve Walter, so many Queenslanders coming to Canberra? What was it about the environment that just seemed to click? And then you got the New South Wales blokes that were developing their careers as well. It was a wonderful time.
Yeah, it was a great time. Stevie Jackson came into the mix as well, I think the next year, 87, and so many Queenslanders. But there was people from or players from all over the place. And I guess nearly everyone was sort of removed from their own environment. So you had to, you had to mix with everyone. You had to kind of help out other players, younger players. Craig Bellamy really springs to mind. I had no idea. I've said it before. I had no idea he was going to go on to be, probably the greatest coach of the modern era. But he was, in particular, he and his wife Wendy were great with young players that would come into town. He was from out of town himself, but he'd been there for a few years. But they had players staying with them, have young blokes over for dinner. They just knew that you had to look after it. Everyone on the outside. So we all had to, I guess, you had to. We're all in a really similar position, that we're all kind of outsiders trying to make our way in Canberra. It took a season or two. It didn't happen overnight. It really didn't click until Wayne Bennett came as coach in 87 that things started to fall into place as far as success goes. We made that 87 grand final and got beaten by Manly, and somehow we missed out in 88. We had injuries, in particular to Mal. But things came good in 89. But I love that you mentioned those Blues players too, because those guys coming through, Laurie, Daley, Bradley, Clyde, Ricky Stuart, some of the greatest players that have ever played the game, particularly in blue jerseys. They were outstanding. Glenn Lazarus, of course, the great Lazo, probably the best front row that's ever played. It just all kind of fell into place. Tim Sheen's had a massive influence on all that. So having that success at club level, and I think in particular, I know the catalyst behind all of that was Mal Meninga. Mal's signing for that club meant so much to their ability to attract other players or keep players, keep Bradley Clyde. Laurie Daley had, I think, every club in the comp wanted him, and he came to Canberra, and I imagine Mal being there had a bit to do with that. So Mal was really the catalyst behind that. Donnie Ferner, of course, was the coach and signing everyone up. but then when Wayne came and helped the way that we trained and were prepared and instilled a bit of confidence in everyone, well, it all started to fall into place.
Did you ever play against Mal Meninga?
I did once. Back in those 80s, now I was filthy about this, because in 80, I finally made State of Origin in 86. And then in 87, they decided they're going to have a State of Origin trial or a city country game like they did in Sydney. And they never had it. And I thought, I've finally got the jersey, and now they're going to give Scotty a chance to get his jersey back. So he got picked for country of origin. I was city of origin. And, of course, Mal's a country boy from Bundy. And we had to play against him. And I had to make one tackle on him. And I think I grabbed an ankle and someone came over the top and helped me stop before he charged over the line. I avoided him the whole night. I never wanted to tackle the big fella. But yeah, I was dirty that we had. And then the next year they played Sydney-based or New South Wales-based Queenslanders versus Brisbane-based Queenslanders. Another Origin trial, and once again, Scotty was still playing up in Brisbane, so he got to go, and I got to go, and fortunately, I held on to my spot. But I never really wanted to play against Mal, and he made it known to me when in the end of '85 when I was talking about going down to Canberra, and Mal sort of sidled up and said, "Well, you can go to North, or you can go to East, or you can go to wherever, but if you play for anyone else, I'm going to belt you." So that helped me make my mind up to go and play for the Green Machine. Best decision I ever made.
Well, you were right in your comments before about wanting to play Origin. Didn't think you'd be able to do it from Brisbane, because when you went to Canberra, I was going to say Sydney then for a moment, but when you went to Canberra, 1986 was the year that you made your State of Origin debut. What was that like, and what are your memories from, say, walking into camp? It was a different beast back in those days to the hype and the hoopla that we have now. What was it like back then?
Well, it was an amazing feeling to know that I'd made the team, but yeah, there wasn't so much a media frenzy or anything. They'd lost the first game, Queensland. I say they because I wasn't playing, but we'd lost the first game in '86, and they'd lost the series the year before for the first time. So things were pretty dire. Now, it's amazing how things fall into place. I played club footy under Wayne Bennett at 84, 85 at Souths. So I kind of had him in my corner. He knew I could play. They had to make some changes, and I got called in. Now, if someone else was the coach, I might not have got a start, and Scotty might have stayed there. And I got to say, Colin Scott, wonderful player and had a fantastic career, but I might never, because the fullbacks that were playing at the time, Dale Shearer was at Manly. Tony Curry, I don't think people realise how good a player he was. He was a wonderful fullback as well. I played a lot of my juniors against him and senior footy. There was a hell of a lot of good fullbacks around. I got the nod. And Mal actually broke the news to me. We were having dinner after the game in a pizza restaurant in Canberra with my wife, Carleen, and Mal and his wife, Debbie. And he broke the news. He went and made the phone. Didn't have mobile phones then. He just went and made the phone call to the QRL, and he came back very serious face and said, you made it. So I remember that clearly. And then I remember going into camp and thinking, well, I only really know Mal. I don't know the rest of these blokes. I played against Gino and, GD and the likes, and Turtle, Greg Koneski was there, and Brian Niebling, the great horse. All of those blokes, I barely knew them, but I knew Mal, and that really helped. So we went on a few bonding sessions. We trained, and we had to play footy as well, of course, and lost. We actually lost those first two games. We lost that series 3-0. So
3-0,
I'm thinking things are going to, the next year, in fact, the first game of '87 we lost as well. So my first three games were losses, and I'm thinking this is not going to last too long. I held my own though. I was going okay, but Wayne did make it really clear to us how important it was to win, to turn things around. We won the next couple of games in '87. We actually went on the greatest winning streak Queensland's ever had. We won 8 games in a row. I know that 8 series in a row was absolutely unbelievable what Mal did with that team, but we won 8 games in a row. Now that's difficult to do. So, but coming into camp, Wally and the guys Yeah, I never felt so welcome. I thought it might have been tricky because Scotty was their great mate and he'd been fullback all along, but they made me feel right at home.
Does that say also something about why Queensland is successful?
I think it does. Yeah, it does. And as I said, I'd always had this hatred, might be too strong, and it's probably not. Hatred of New South Wales or the Blues or the players or what what it meant or how they kind of destroyed Queensland for so many years using our own players. So I had this inbuilt. I was so dirty about it, but then I got into camp and I realised that it was nothing compared to Wally, and Fatty and Choppy and they and they had experiences with those blokes at test level. Only the year before there was a big drama when they dropped a bunch of Queenslanders on that New Zealand tour, or maybe '84 it was. So they, I just ran on the back of that, just tried to play my best and went out. We did have big bonding sessions, but it was never crazy over the top in the lead up to the game in the last few days. But the first few nights were always pretty special.
Is it fair to say that you were in more danger from Wally Lewis's driving than the bonding sessions?
No, I don't think so. Wally was an incredibly good driver. Anyone else, I think I would have, maybe not got on the bus. We had a mini bus. A lot of people would have heard about. And Gino was the co-pilot. Wally's sitting driving. Gino's a co-pilot. And I remember we used to, and honestly, he went amazingly well in some of those, the rallies or the celebrity races they used to do at the Formula One, and unbelievable driver. And we had a car space in the hotel we stayed at the top of Wickham Terrace. There was a space for the bus that left about a foot either end, and he would fly in on that and slide the bus in sideways to park, and it almost rocked like it's going to fall over. And we just go, yeah, and we jump out, and people would be looking at us going, there, he's mad. And he'd bunny hop the bus up a hill, like at Red Hill or at Paddington, for 100 metres. And then they'd turn the wipers out on the bus so that they sprayed outwards, and we'd go past people, we'd stop at a set of lights and someone would be standing there or on their bike and we'd spray. And Gino put his foot over and hit the wiper button, the water spray would go out, and then we'd take off, he'd screech around the corner. He was unbelievable, the king. Driving, so that was always a highlight. But actually, I've got to say, I did fear for my life once. We were driving. We used to train in Brizzy, and then this was in the late 80s, maybe 88 or so, and then we'd head down the Gold Coast for a couple of nights. So maybe on the Friday, we'd head to the Goldie Friday night, Saturday night, come back Sunday. And we were heading down there, and on the way, we stopped at Macca's somewhere for a feed. It's a very healthy State of Origin beside this one. So we're having a feed, and blokes, just, there was no bin, so blokes just sort of threw their food into the door, the automatic door opens into that well. Blokes throw. So when we stopped, we could throw it in the bin. Well, Wally's driving, and we're down the highway like doing 90 k's an hour, 100, whatever, and he just gets out of his seat. Unbeknownst to us, Gino has got his foot across steering. That's it. Gene's steering with his foot on the steering wheel. Well, Wally gets up, goes back, says, "You bunch of pigs," opens the door up and throws all the rubbish out. And we just go, what? And we're still just motoring down the highway. We're gradually getting slower, and then he jumps back in the seat. So that's the one time. And I know that it was probably around that time that Arthur Beetson refused to coach if they didn't get a bus, a full-size bus, a full-size coach. That was the end of it. He said no more of Wally's driving because Arthur thought it was signing a death warrant.
Wally was always the centre of a lot of controversy. The beer can throwing at Lang Park when he got sin bin by Michael Stone on that particular day. What are your memories of that?
I do. I know that the crowd went crazy. So a few things that came out of that. That was the catalyst for us to make a comeback and win the game. Because he got sin binned. I can't even remember whether it was his fault or not or whatever, but yeah, what the king got sin bin, so in the north east corner. So they started throwing cans, the Queensland fans, at probably at Mick Stone, at the Blues, I don't know, and Chicka Ferguson was the Canberra winger at the time. He was on that wing and he was dodging and ducking and weaving. No cans got him. Anyone else would have got knocked out, but Chicka was too fast for that. The amazing man, Johnny Ferguson. So I saw that's all going on. They're throwing cans, but it's sort of, and then the players are having to throw the cans back off. Like Blocker said, it proves just how dumb Queensland fans are, because he said most of them were full. So they're throwing the cans off. But I think it really unsettled them, and we scored not long later than that. Now, one of the big things that came out of that was that that's when they went, I think, mid-strength and no cans. For a long time, I think they just served it in plastic cups, which was, not how you want to watch your footy. But, Wally was always the centre of drama, whether he was, I was there when Wally was, he first ever State of Origin game he couldn't play in, and that was a big deal. That was about 1988, you'll probably correct me if I'm wrong, or 89. He'd played every game until then. Mal had missed a couple because of his broken arms, but Queensland had been so successful, but never played without Wally in the team. And, Peter Jackson, Mick Hagan came in and did a great job.
You played at Lane Park on many occasions in the Brisbane Rugby League competition, but what was it like running out with that Queensland jersey on at Origin level at the same ground?
Oh, mate, just saying that, it makes me the chest puff out. It's still amazing. It's still surreal. I know I did it. It's hard to believe that it happened in a way, because there's so much that goes on, behind the scenes to get there, and every player knows that. No matter what level you play at, there's a big effort to make it. But to play for Queensland I just can't. I played for Australia, and I'm so proud of that too. But hard to describe, Potts. Really hard to describe. But I don't know. One thing that was that Wally and Co had said to me before it was, you're going to have to yell, or you're going to have to go and tap blokes on the shoulder if you want them to move defensive. You won't be able to hear. And I'm thinking, and you can't. It's even louder now, I think, the new Suncorp Stadium. But even back then, it was so loud, and I'd never experienced anything like that. The only time I'd ever cramped in a game of football in my life was in State of Origin, happened a couple of times, because you're just continually moving and getting yourself into play and and staying involved. And not that I wasn't when I was playing club footy, but it was just next level, and the fans were next level. I didn't have success for those first few games, as I said, but it still was an amazing feeling.
Have you ever reflected, Badge, on the fact that we talk about these Queensland sides that you played in, and you rattle off the names which are legendary and immortals, and then you go back to the Canberra Raiders side and you mention the New South Wales blokes and etc. The era in which you played, and I know sometimes we can look back with rose-coloured glasses, but when you sit down and reflect, how do you reflect on those players and that era that you played in?
Well, it's hard not to think it was a great era. I know it was a great era. Whether it was the greatest or not is debatable. And, some of the reasons might be just around the rules as they were, or the fact that we kind of went from semi-professional to professional, and footy was, wasn't as structured as it is now. There was structure, there was game plans, there was, but it wasn't quite as over the top structured as I think it can be now, or over structured. So we could play what was in front of us. Now I think the best players still do that, but that was the era that I came through at Souths, and in Brisbane, and then the stuff that happened when we were in Canberra. I'd like to think we were kind of leading the way as far as our strength and conditioning went. We really sort of went next level with that under Tim Sheens. but also I like to think the style of footy that we played was it was very open. Just off the back of that mid-'80s when Canterbury was winning comps and they were, defend, and, when you win a game with a really low score and you do it all year and then the grand final's 4-2, I think the game got pretty boring in Sydney at that stage. Well, I like to think that we were a big part of a massive change in the game where it became more attack-focused. Not quite as much as England, but certainly that's the way I played, and that's the way most of the blokes and players and the coaches wanted the game to be played at Canberra and other clubs. Brisbane, of course, when the Broncos came in, and a lot of other clubs went much the same. And I think that's carried over for the last 30 or 40 years since then. I think it's really important. So it's a really important era. But as far as the standard of players go, too, yeah, I think it was as good as, if not better than most. Although, we look back at, as I mentioned earlier, that wonderful Queensland team that won 8 in a row, 9 out of 10 series under Mal, that was a hell of a good footy team as well. So you could put a good case forward for them as well.
And there were a few hell of good grand finals you played in too, Badge, and those really good ones stick in the memory because obviously when you win them, South, and then you head to Canberra in a couple of grand finals, one arguably one of the greatest wins of all time. What are your memories of those grand final wins with the Raiders, particularly that one over Balmain?
Yeah, well, I only won 2 out of the Raiders have won 3, and I won in 89-90. In particular, Balmain, yeah, it was outstanding. And I had actually, we beat Penrith the next year, and that was more of a relief than the euphoria that we felt when we won in 89. But I'd forgotten so much about that 1990 game until the last year or two. I actually watched the whole game for the first time. It sort of always got tucked away because of 89. So memories are very special, great bunch of people, but there was a massive build up to that. So you kind of had to be there to understand that. And it was always the case of you have to lose one to win one. Now I know that's been blown out of the water plenty of times since, but we got to the grand final in '87. The Raiders, their first grand final. They'd only been in the comp, or we'd only been in the comp since '82. So to get there in '87 and sort of come from nowhere in '86, we hadn't even made the finals, and playing some great, attacking footy with the Ivan Henjak springs to mind, and and Jacko and Mal and Chris O'Sullivan, and playing some really attacking footy. But we got there, and it was the town celebrated. It was one of those occasions where everyone was so excited about it, but we had a job to do. But unfortunately, Manly were just way too good for us on the day. So we felt a bit empty about that. And then '88, we were having a really big year, but there were some injuries at the back end of the season, didn't help us. So we crashed out in the finals. And when we came through in '89, it was once again we did have to make our way through the back end of the finals. The first team, I think, to come from outside the top 3 in that top 5 era. And we had a job to do, but Balmain were rightly favourites, they'd been beaten the year before. So it was always, I think it was always going to be a bit of a fairy tale, whichever way it went. Fortunately, things went pretty well for us late in the game, and we got away with that one. So my memories are outstanding. But either side of that, we won in '90, but I also lost my last grand final I played in '91, and I have massive regrets about that still. We'd won 2 in a row. We were going for 3. 91, I didn't play that as well as I had the other years. I just was a bit off, and I think maybe a few other players were too. But Penrith fully deserved that win against us. But it's crazy I almost need to see a sports psychologist about it. I'd won 2 in a row. I'm still dirty about the third one, getting beaten.
Sorry for bringing it up. You mentioned, earlier, about representing your country, which you did on numerous occasions, 2 kangaroo tours, and it was good to see them come back. But you played a lot of tour matches on the first tour because Gary Jack, that you talk about the battle you had with Colin Scott for the Queensland jersey. Well, I had that battle with Gary Jack as well for the Australian jersey, and How many tour games did you play on one tour, for example, 1986? I think it was about 10, wasn't it?
I think something like that. Yeah, we played 18 or 20 games. So I think there was 5 tests, and I was never going to play in a test because Jimmy Jack was the fullback, the incumbent, and playing great footy. So I was just playing all the midweek games, and it ended up being 10 or 11. I barely played a weekend game because the way it worked out on both those tours was you played on the weekends, you played the tests, or you played the best teams in Wigan and Leeds and whoever else. So your test team would play the weekends and, say against Wigan, and then they wouldn't play midweek. Some of them had to back up. We had 28 players, and of course it was a 15-man squad back then. So there had to be some players that backed up, sort of the bench players that backed up and played midweek. But yeah, I had one very different tours. My tour in '86 was very social. I had a great time. I kind of knew I was never going to play a test unless there was an injury. Gary Jack was my roomie, so I was out. Well, we'd play Wednesday and win 60-0 somewhere, and then we'd have a good night Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and then the test team would play on the Saturday, so we'd have a good night with them again Saturday. And very, very social tour with some of my best mates, to be Paul Dunn and Paul Searan and Desi Hasler and Brandy Alexander, and we had a great old time. But then it was all very different in 1990. I was the fullback and I was the incumbent, and I was had to be a lot more serious, and we lost out that first test at Wembley, which was massive at the time. So we were under a hell of a lot of pressure all the way through. So very different tours, but I look back on both with fond memories.
It's interesting you mentioned then the names of mates, lifelong mates, and they're all New South Wales. And at the start you talk about the hate for New South Wales. It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it, when we talk about state of origin and the inverted commas hate, yet you rattle off names that are now lifelong mates that wore that blue jersey. I find that really sums up to some respect what state of origin's about.
Yeah, it does in a way. Blocker and Ciro and Benny, those Balmain guys, and people sort of can't believe that they'd even want to be mates with a Canberra player after, all the dramas that they went through in that 89 series. But we're good mates. I've even paid them all the ultimate compliment that they're good enough blokes that we'd they're like Queenslanders. They're almost Queenslanders. That's how good they are. So, but it's funny when you spend a lot of time on tour, you realise they're all just like, we're all the same. It's just our birth certificate says we've got to play for one team or the other. But you really get to know, guys when you're away. There were 11-week tours, Pots. I recently went on the one of the tour with a tour group over for the 2.5-week tour to England for with the Kangaroos, that 3-test series. And we went for 11 weeks, and the last 3 weeks were in France, and you just wanted to get home, and you knew that the games were sort of gimmies. But you stuck it out, but you spent a lot of time with those blokes, and you formed lifelong friendships.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
There's been a few, and there were coaches when I was a kid that brought the best out of me. And Graham Atherton played at South, and he played for Queensland, and he was one of the all-time great blokes, and he coached me in the under-18s and gave me a real new perspective on my footy and and how to carry yourself as a man. So he had a big influence. And when I went into grade at South, Bobby McCarthy was the coach, and Macca made this big decision. I played a couple of years in first grade in the centres with Mal. We were centre aside. And he's the one, when there was an injury to the fullback, it was going to be fullback in 83, Alan Power. He got injured in the pre-season, and Macca decided to give me a run at fullback because Peter Jackson had come to the club, and this kid was set it alight in the trials. And I thought, here we go. He's going to put me. I thought fullbacks were like wingers. That's the way you're making your way slowly closer and closer to the sideline until you're out of the team. So Bob Macca gave me that start there, and I loved it from the first. I was insulted at first. I was upset. And from the first game, I went, I just love this. This is great. This roaming, this opportunity to just sort of turn up anywhere in the field. I loved it. So Bob McCarthy did that for me, and then I played a lot of footy under Wayne Bennett for a few years at South, and then we won that comp in 85, and then he came to Canberra and played Origin under him, and he had a huge influence on me as well. So there's been plenty, but as far as players go, it's got to be Mal and I are great mates, and I am a couple of years younger than him. So I came through, and he'd already had 2 or 3 years in grade. He was playing for Queensland. He made his debut for Australia, and I was this young kid coming through. But we formed a really good combination, and going to Canberra with him, that helped me immensely. And we played, I think, all up about 12 seasons together. So he started before me, he finished after me. He did everything in the game. He's an absolute immortal, but I was fortunate that I was there for a fair bit of that.
Well, what do you reckon, Badge, the young boy from Acacia Ridge who made his way to Davies Park and played, in a premiership-winning side for Souths, and then went to Canberra as a member of their first premiership-winning side, played over 200 first-grade games around the world, 2 Kangaroo tours, 16 games for Queensland. What do you reckon that young bloke would have thought if someone would have tapped him on the shoulder at Davies Park and said, mate, this is your career ahead of you?
I would have said bullshit. That's not going to happen. I'll be happy to play a couple of games in first grade for the mighty Magpies. That would have made me super, super proud. So, I am proud of what I achieved, Potson. But there's also that bit of luck and a bit of happenstance, things that happen at the right time. And I didn't get any injuries really until late in my career, so I was quite fortunate with that too. But on the other side of it, I worked bloody hard. I know I did that, and every player that's made it knows that they had to do that as well. So, yeah, very, very proud, very fortunate, and so proud to be a FOG, to be a former Queensland player. It's a wonderful organisation, and just nice to be part of it.
Well, FOG number 47, Gary Belcher, thanks so much for your time today, and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thanks, Mark, and love your work, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this episode of the FOG's Queenslander podcast. If there's a FOG you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.